And I actually goofed this recording a little bit. So today's lecture is actually going to be uploaded in two parts. So if you're watching this right here is going to be titled Part 3, but really it's just a continuation of Part 2. Part 2 of this assignment and Part 3 of this assignment are both going up on today's September the 14th. So just keep that in mind. But I had another question just regarding what we went over in Part 2 with using the plane effector, how we combine that with the motext object. For anyone who's using the Illustrator route where they're drawing their graphic or tracing it out with the pen tool and bringing it in and using the extrude object and all that fun jazz, you'll quickly realize if you select that object and you make the plane effector and we give it the box fall off and we make it wider and we move it around, this isn't having any effect on our text. Oh no, what do we do? Because we're doing the Illustrator route, or when we're using these MoGraph, the objects that are under this MoGraph menu, they sort of want to work together. Basically, anything in this effector list here, which is where we got the plane effector, it wants to affect one of these objects here. And since this is where the motext object comes from, that's how they sort of link up together and they interact. If you're just going straight with the Illustrator route, you'll probably recognize that your top level object is just a null, and that means that the plane effector is sort of confused. It's missing a crucial piece. So what you want to do to fix that is with whatever your Illustrator file is, in this case I just wrote a blank word that just says text. This object needs to be put into the fracture object. And so what we do is when we make this, we can hold down Alt, and you'll see that my Illustrator file is now a child of this fracture object. And on its default setting, we can see this object tab right here, the mode is set to straight. We don't want either of the other two settings. We want to just keep it on straight right here. So when we make the plane effector now, with this fracture object selected, we'll now see that it's going to have an effect. So we'll do the same thing, box fall off, give it some extra width, and actually I think right, I was wrong. So we do actually want to change one setting on the fracture object. We want to change the mode from straight to explode segments and connect. I had a feeling I was going to mess that up on the first try. But yeah, you want the explode segments and connect setting, which is the bottom one in the fracture object. And now you'll see that this is now having the letter by letter effect that we are used to seeing. Cool.
How do you separate the text? So like if you want to move one letter just in one direction, the other in one direction.
So in that case, what you can do is, good question. All right, so the question there was, what if I want these different letters to animate differently? Basically, let's imagine we want the T to move vertically, or we want the T to move horizontally and the E to move vertically, just as a wild example. What we can do is we'll have to split this object up a little bit. So if we uncheck the fracture object, and if we open this all the way down to where we have our object here, and we go to polygon mode, what we want to do is we want to break up any of these letters that we need to move independently. So I'm going to grab a polygon on the T here, and instead of shift clicking all of these and your life being nothing but suffering and misery trying to find all of these, imagine if you try to click all of these on the E. That'd take all day long. So with one piece selected, you can hit U to get to our friend, the selection menu, and then the command we're looking for is select connected. Anyone spot that and blurt out the hotkey? W, yes. Select connected. Oops, I lied. What we have to do is we have to optimize it. So we want to select the object, and anyone remember where optimize is? O, yes. So just like when we're working with a cylinder, remember, we always want to optimize the cylinder. Same kind of weird thing with the text. And so now we should be able to select one of these pieces of the T, hit U to get our selection menu, and then W for the select connected command, and it just grabbed the whole entirety of the T. Cool. So in order to break this up, we now want to do the split command, which I think we might have touched on when we were doing the chair, possibly. Can't quite recall. But the split command is also under the U menu. Anyone spot split? P, yes. So when we hit that on our keyboard, we'll see that another object just showed up in our objects list. And if we click on this S here on the side, which is the solo button, and we go to solo single, we can see that, hey, this is just a T on its own. Just a happy T. It's kind of hanging out all by itself. So just rename that T, and then we'll turn solo off so that we can see everything else, and jump back to our text, and we'll do that same thing for the E now. So we've got one piece of this E selected. We can hit U, W to get the whole E, and then U, and then the key P to get what is now going to be just the E on its own. So I'll just quickly do that for the other letters. Now, however you need to break up your object is going to, be specific to your project. Oops. So I'm going to turn the traffic lights off on the top text, which was all of them individually, or all of them combined, sorry. So now I can see as I click through each of these, we're highlighting one at a time, which is cool. So what I can do now is turn these checkboxes back on, and we'll see that the plane effector is still going to affect each of them individually, but what we can do is now we can mix and match our hierarchy. And what I mean by that is we can have different groups of letters or different fracture objects and different plane effectors, and kind of work on letters or groups of stuff one at a time. What I mean by that is, well, I'll just demonstrate. So I'll select both of these, copy and paste to make a set, or a duplicate. And what I'll do here is I'm going to say TE and then XT. So if I open these groups up, and so in the XT group, I'm going to hide everything except for the X and the little t. So I'm going to turn those traffic lights off there. And in this one, the TE group, I'm going to turn this set of traffic lights off. So if I grab this plane, we'll see that it's not doing what I wanted it to do. So maybe instead of just turning the traffic lights off, we'll just delete the objects. It's always fun doing a live demonstration like this. Cool. So with one plane effector, so I'm going to call this XT plane, and this one will be TE plane. We'll see that as I I move these around, I can affect different groups of these letters. So for this plane effector, I can go to its parameter, and instead of it having Y position, I'll give it X position. So let's try something like minus 200. And so we can see that these letters can now come in one at a time. So if I just, if I just real quick animate these, or set up some keyframes where I'm going to set X position keyframes at frame 0, and then at frame 90, I'm going to grab these and move those over that way, just because this is how that's currently all set up. If I play this and turn these traffic lights off, just so that we can focus on our text. Now this is sort of a weird setup, but hey, there we go. We've now got different groups of letters doing different things. So it's a little bit more convoluted of a process, a little bit kind of trickier if you're doing the Illustrator route to have this sort of individual control, but you know, it's pretty much the same process if you're using the MoText. So feel free to experiment if you want to. But let's jump back to the main course, and that is the material and lighting. So during the break, I tweaked this material a little bit. So if I render, we're going to see that this is a bit different looking than where we left in the break, but if I jump back to my reference, it's actually quite a bit closer. If we ignore the M, because the M is the one that has the light shining on it currently, if we just focus on the GOTH, it's actually not looking too bad. It's pretty dark, and we've got these nice, very specific highlights on some of these letters. Or we're seeing the effect of, you know, when I talked about that fillet cap setting, the little roundness on the edge of our text, kind of, you know, the effect that's on the edge of the desks here at the school. We're seeing that effect very prominently here, kind of on the top of the H, on the tops and bottoms of some of these letters, which is, in my case, really, really what I wanted to dial in. And so what I did to really achieve that was I played around with the reflection value here. I changed it from normal to add, and this specular value I lowered quite a bit. I believe it was at 100 before the break, and I played around with the width and the fall off, some of these settings down here a little bit more. This stuff is kind of in depth, and it's pretty hard to explain just verbally. So I would encourage you guys to, you know, once you get some light set up and you've got a material that's got, you know, a little bit of, you've given it a little bit of love, feel free to play with these settings to really get a grasp on particularly the width and fall off setting. Just, you know, kind of get a feel for if you make it very small like I have here. Let's just render that again. So this is almost a very shiny, you could almost describe it as like polished or like wet, kind of. Whereas if we raise these two values, we're going to see something very different. It's a lot more washed out. It almost kind of looks like maybe chalk or some sort of like clay, kind of. So yeah, just do a little bit of experimentation on your own. Feel free to call me over if you've got a specific look that you're trying to recreate that isn't this. You know, I know it can be a little daunting. But with that, I think if we jump into our camera and just sort of give this a look over here. I think we're pretty dang close to nailing this look. So I feel like we're ready to move on to the end here, which will just be, in my case, the animating of this front light, because remember I want this to run kind of from left to right. So I'll just set that up real quick. So I'm going to animate the X position at frame 0 and at frame 150. The X value farther over here now. So hopefully if we run through some of these, we should see where this light's moving. Can kind of spot it. I can always play with it a little bit more, but I can tell at the beginning here it's lighting up the G, and as we work our way over, the highlight's going to be right here on the top of this H, which is pretty close to what I want. Actually, I want it to finish a little bit earlier, so that hopefully by the end of this animation it's over here on the M now, and the A. Cool. So when I render this, what I want to do is, since I've edited the brightness of my lights and my sky and stuff, what I want to do is I want to make sure I'm rendering with an alpha channel. Now, I'm sure that at some point through Illustrator and Photoshop classes we've worked with an alpha channel, and that allows us to layer stuff together. So we can have the text on top of, say, a background. Because right now, I like the way this text looks, but we can tell that there's absolutely nothing visible back here. It's all purely black, right? So if I set up rendering with an alpha channel, what I can do is I can put my own cloud image back here to recreate, the clouds that are visible here in my reference. So, we can use the power that we have in front of us with After Effects to replace the background and just render out the text just on its own. So we can do that pretty easily just by jumping into our render settings, and in the Save menu here we want to check on this button right here called Alpha Channel. Now I would probably figure to guess that almost everyone will want to render with an alpha channel, so that way you can control what you put in the background of your title using After Effects. So it's just one checkbox. It's pretty simple. I don't think it's going to kill anyone to turn on the alpha channel.
But if you have a black background, you don't need it, right?
No. If your background is purely black, pretend if there were no clouds here at all, I wouldn't need the alpha channel, but it's only one checkbox. So while we're in this render settings, let's set up the rest of our stuff. So resolution is 960 by 540. We want to make sure that we're rendering out all frames. And then in Save, we can go make ourselves our render folder. Anti-aliasing at best. So cool, you've got all this set up. Don't do what I'm right about to do. So just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to undo half of the settings that I just did, just so that I can point out the reason why we're doing that whole alpha channel business. So I just rendered out one random frame, and here in my alpha channel we can see that awesome, sweet. The alpha channel is showing me that I've got pure white here where my text is and pure black where my background was, which is indicating to me that, hey, cool, your settings worked. I'm now good to fire off this render, knock on wood. I should be done at this point. All I've got to do is render it out and sort of sit back, and then we'll move on to the After Effects step, which I think we'll probably save for next week. But I think we're good. So let's jump back to these render settings and turn all that back to what it should be. 960, 540, all frames. The alpha channel's checked on. We should be good. So I'm going to pause the recording, click render, and we'll work for a little while, and then we'll check back in once this finishes. But first I'm going to save. So now that Cinema has finished rendering our sequence, we can see that we've got all 150 frames here. In my case, this is all good. We know the alpha channel worked by when we click layer here, and then we can view the alpha channel. We can see that this all looked sweet. So now that we load this into After Effects, which we'll be going over in the next part, so don't worry. We can see here that I've got my text and I put my sky back in the background, which will go over a couple different options on you know, some different backgrounds and the different sort of things that you can do, maybe a little bit of effects or you know, special stuff to kind of jazz this up a little bit more. But yeah, tune in for the next lesson when we'll cover that. It looks like our cinema render is good, so yeah, we're all set.